So, Alex, thank you for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about when in your life, when did you start to trace your family roots?
First of all, I really appreciate being able to be here and talk with you both. I think I became very interested in genealogy when I was in 8th grade here in Madison, and that was around 1977 when Alex Haley's Roots came out. I started tracing my genealogy. I remember writing a paper in high school, going to the State Historical Society, and so from that mini series, I just felt hooked. So it's always been an interest of mine since the late 70s.
How did you know you had these particular relatives?
My father told my mother stories when they were married. And so as I got older, my mom would say, you know, your dad used to say that your grandpa would mention that he's got an old uncle named Thomas G, and he was an old white guy with blue eyes. And I just thought sometimes older black people refer to fair-skinned black people as white. Mm-hmm. I just assumed it was a fair-skinned black person until I got down and saw that the founder of the G store was Thomas G. And I realized this was the uncle my grandfather was talking about. So I'd heard stories, but in my head as a kid, I couldn't understand how I had white ancestors, so it didn't really compute.
It's such an incredible journey, and I wish we had time to talk about all of it, but sure. Tell us a little bit about what happened next. You were researching for your Black History course, and you
Right.
saw a post that took you on an incredible journey. Tell us about that.
Definitely. In preparing for that monologue, I wanted to connect the history course participants with history to know that this wasn't very long ago. And so stumbled on a post from a cousin and followed up with him, and we wrote back and forth, and he invited me down to New Orleans. And I found out that he is the descendant of Reuben G, who was our family's slave owner. So the G family is Welsh. They were given the Homestead Act by President Van Buren, I believe it was. And my great-great-great-grandmother was Venus, who was a slave who was owned by Reuben G and was raped by her. And their son, Henderson, is my granddaddy's granddaddy. And so when he and I put pieces together, we realized that we are the descendants of two brothers, the white brother who with his dad owned his half-brother, his black brother, Henderson.
What went through your mind when you discovered you had white relatives?
Pain. Because being part white is the American story. Mark, what I think people have not realized is that think of any African-American person you know, Winfrey, James, Bryant, they're not West African names. And so this story is the story of almost every African-American in the United States. Mm-hmm. But I think it's the fact that with my grandfather's grandfather, the wealthy white Welsh family, the G's, became black. And the fact that their wealth was built upon the free labor of sired children and acquired slaves, that and combined with the fact that America tells me to pull myself up by my bootstrap, and the bootstrap by which the G family pulled itself up was my great-great-grandmother, Venus, and the fact that that story was not told really saddened me, because it's a powerful story of resilience, but yet folks like me are still victimized because we have not caught up with our white relatives. So not knowing the whole story of that is what's more painful than knowing that I'm a descendant of a slave owner. I'm a descendant of a slave owner and a slave.
Did you feel a connection with your cousin?
Oddly enough, I did. Oddly, I didn't try to, because I didn't know to what extent they fully understood this. I mean, knowing that you have relatives that are black, if you don't know history, it's like, well, like was it just a black guy and a white woman and they intermarried, and like what happened? But when I got there, I realized not only that John was a G, his mother's maiden name was G, but as he started talking, his great-grandfather, R.L.G., married a woman named Beulah Wilder. My great-grandfather, Oscar G., who's buried in Milwaukee, married a woman named Lilla Wilder. So we found that we were double cousins, and so that has all kinds of intrigue around it. Like, were the plantations, the G's and the Wilders, breeding people together? Were they allowing black slaves to enslave people to marry? So just understanding the darkness around that story and the hiddenness, that we're not taught the humanity of black people, that they were slaves, and our white counterparts weren't taught that they enslaved people or benefited from that system. So to have and embody that pain and not have others realize it is painful in itself, because these were tremendous people who lived through difficult times, and everything I now do is to honor them and their legacy and all they went through so that I could be free and black and a contributor to society.
John invited you to his home in New Orleans, and in the documentary, you go down there to visit him, to reconnect with him. He talks a lot about how there was a lot of resentment within his family to embrace their history. It is an amazing experience to watch. What was it like for you the first time you met him, and are you still connected with him today?
Sure. I will say it's interesting as I've met other relatives who are like John's nephew. There are folks in the family who have felt they might be ashamed of the history, but they have never said that they don't want to meet me. Oh, so one of John's nephews wanted to make the point clear that we've got folks that really do want to meet you, know more of our story. I would say that John was warm. He had genuine Southern hospitality and just welcomed us right from the beginning. And in an odd way, I felt this sense of connection. And so it felt very interesting being there, but very surreal. Mark and Susan, while we were talking, my assistant said, Pastor, you need to take a look at your cell phone. And there were texts all about what was happening in Charlottesville. So while we were talking about how his family became wealthy by owning my family and siring my great-great-grandfather, there were white men marching in Charlottesville saying, our country's being taken from us. So the irony, the juxtaposition of those realities and just sitting in this surreal environment made me feel like I was having an out-of-body experience. I didn't realize I had been there until about a week later.
Wow. What do you hope viewers of the documentary take away from this?
I hope that they understand that this is a microcosm of U.S. history, not just Black history. This is not an exception. This was the rule. I want America to understand that when almost every Black person was used to build the wealth of this country, but yet excluded from it, set up economic realities that we still experience today. And so I want people to dig deeper into history to understand this is how we got here. So the strategies for moving from here must be a dismantling of certain systems and reality and the rebuilding of them. We can't fix this with backpacks and making sandwiches and giving away food alone. We have to look at the creation of Black wealth. We have to look at how we teach history and why is it that African Americans are still leading in illness, but still straggling or struggling when it comes to economic development, home ownership, et cetera. I want them to realize that there are some systemic realities that we must dismantle and rebuild if we're ever going to be a healthy country that can be a place where everyone can succeed. I want them to realize that a change needs to come if we're really going to fix this. I want America to have a wake up and to understand that this is not my history, this is our history. And that even if you didn't own slaves, you benefited from the exports of cotton that was 58% of our economy. And so that we all are in this together, so we've got to all work to get out of it.
Your incredible story is it's a very hopeful story. It was riveting but positive and hopeful as we move forward from here. And you're working very hard, Alex, to continue the discussion of educating everyone about Black history. Tell us about the Black history course that you're going to be teaching this fall.
Sure. Mark and Susan, my undergraduate degree from Wisconsin was in Afro-American history. So I thought years ago that if we taught people how we got here, it would cause a paradigmatic shift, that people would think differently about history. Thereby assessing that we need to do something very different. So this 9-week course allows people to understand how we got to this point. And we rooted in Wisconsin reality, Dane County reality, Madison reality, so it's very powerful. We have one coming up at the end of the month as a response to the movie. And Dr. Christy Clark-Pujara is going to do a lecture that's called Patriotism and the Cost of Apathy. It's to whet people's appetite. My staff is feverishly working to take our history class and other learning experiences and putting them on a digital platform so that not only can this area, but the nation, the world can understand our history for the sake of mobilizing people to be a part of the solution. I don't want to do the typical Madisonian intellectual ride. That's not what this is about. This is about being enlightened so that we take steps and take action. This is not a Black issue. This is a U.S. issue. It was set up through our Constitution, through our nation, and it benefited white people. And if we're not working in this together to undo it, we are only bequeathing this to our kids and grandkids to continue wrestling with it. So the whole purpose of the history class is to create knowledge so as to create momentum to be a part of the solution.
The documentary, the timing of this couldn't come at a better time. What a great weekend to watch this on America's birthday.
We will be sharing the links to the documentary so that all of you can watch it, and also the information about the upcoming courses as well. Alex, thanks to you for all you continue to do. as we continue to heal and move forward from this point.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Stay strong.
Stay safe and have a great holiday weekend to you and your family as well.
Thanks, Alex.
You as well. Thank you.